Intro, everyone, and we'll do a quick hello. Hey, my name is Sean Wylands. Welcome from inception to posting. Let's get that podcast out there. The hidden panel, because it wasn't on tonight's schedule. That's also how I've been promoting it like all day. So nice. Sorry to everyone who actually organized everything. And yeah, so it's not a secret track. It just couldn't get lined up because Twitch is weird. And with me this evening, I have Gabriel Perez, Jenna Garrett, and Mike Faber. They're going to be helping me walk through the basic steps of creating a podcast. So before we get started, would you all like to introduce yourselves, Gabriel, Jenna, Mike, because that's the order I have on my screen.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Perez. I am an audio engineer, sound designer. I've been composing music for a long time now. And I mostly do sound design and editing for the podcast Quid Pro Roll. That's why I'm here.
I'm Jenna. I do a weekly comics review podcast called Panelology, and I have a lot of other things coming up very soon.
Oh, my name's Mike Faber. I am the host of the Earth Station 1 podcast. I also host the Earth Station Who podcast and the DragonCon Report. And we also have, some part of the ESO network, which is, a network of 23 geeky themed shows. I also teach people how to podcast and mentor upcoming new podcasters, which is pretty awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. And I actually forgot that Mike had said that before. And so hopefully the list that I created for the steps that we're going to go through are similar to what he does when he mentors people. If not, we're going to be getting some interesting back and forth opinions, but I think that'll be okay.
That's what's going to make this interesting.
Everyone's process can be different. So what I wrote out is a basic rule set. And by the way, my background, I've been working with Pro Tools and sound reinforcement and theatrical sound design for 15 years. I worked in video game development as a producer, game designer, audio engineer. And now I do podcasts and voiceover. And I'm still a bartender because it's good money and it pays the bills for the rest of all this fun equipment. So without further ado, what we're going to be doing is going through 12 steps rather rapidly to show everyone what it's like to kind of conceptually go from an idea for a podcast and the things you need to think about to all the way to publishing, to supporting it and getting it out there for people to hear once you've made it.
I saw it and it looked like a true 12-step program. It was awesome.
I realized I counted it right before the show started and like, oh, it's 12 steps. Oh, it's 12 steps.
Kind of fits with your bartending there.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Right. Well, I haven't admitted I have a problem yet. So
yeah. Well, the first step is admitting that you have an idea.
You'll never catch me. Yes. So in the weeks leading up to this, and if there's anyone that's watching that has an idea that they kind of want us to work through, we'll try to get to that. But I also asked our panelists just for ideas. To see if we can get through one, because I think at the most we'll be able to do this twice all the way through. So there's a few ideas at the end of our doc, and honestly, I'm in between a dramatic audiobook reading and interviewing local indie artists, just because I know I've seen a ton of movie review ones. I know I've seen a bunch of Call of Cthulhu actual play ones, solo narratives. I've seen a lot of those. But does anyone have a preference before I just cruise into one of those topics?
I have personally always wanted to try dramatic audiobook readings myself, and hopefully one day I'll get there. So that's my preference out of those two.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Something very similar, because I used to do it when my son was growing up. I used to read Harry Potter to him in all the different voices, and so it was tons of fun to do. And so I was always like, that'd be great to do a voiceover and to do it like characters and stuff like that.
Awesome. Jenna.
Yeah.
For this idea. Yes.
Awesome.
She's like, whatever you say, that's awesome.
I'm here for it.
So step one is inception. At least that's the step that I wrote. Man, gosh, I'm all I'm going to be thinking about is AA now. Great. So we come up with, or you as a podcaster, future podcaster, come up with an idea, dramatic audiobook reading. Now you do want to get specific. Is there any kind of hook, anything that's different, anything that's weird about your voice? And by weird, I can mean unique. You have a deviated septum, you have a cleft palate, you have something that actually makes your voice sound different, as though that might be something that could be a soft spot, a sore point, how you might feel about yourself. that's actually really, really good when it comes to your voice, because it could be unique, it could be interesting, or it could be that you read through Harry Potter as though it's all Looney Tunes characters. You know, it's coming up with an idea that it is really you, that you really love, that's unique, and then that doesn't sound like everything else that's on the market. Because when it comes down to it, you have to really like what you're doing, or you're going to get burnt out really, really, really quickly.
Yeah, and making sure that it's something that's for it, like Inception wise, like you were saying with the voices.
Mm-hmm.
Podcasting is all about being able to have that bit of show, like even it's a little bit of showmanship with it. So being comfortable with like whatever you want to do with this idea, being like being able to take it into yourself and be like, this is something that is a part of me. Is very important.
Also, you have to be prepared, though. You might find your niche, but also be prepared to roll with it and grow with it.
Yes.
And, be able to take it, I've been doing podcasting for 12 years. I'm not the same podcaster I was 12 years ago that I am today. And, my show is not the same it was 10 years ago that I started, and be prepared to grow with that. And so when you find your idea, find something you're comfortable with, but something that sets, like Sean was saying, sets yourself apart from everybody else. And that's the best part about it. And that's how you're going to have fun with it too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. So since we're all doing this, literally this panel together, the second thing I put on there was partners. I tend to produce a lot of things with people or for people, where I have multiple persons involved. And that can be tricky because you have to have agreement and consensus with everyone. I mean, I have a director who works on one of my podcasts, and he doesn't record, he doesn't do any of the editing, he does some production and some outreach for local bands. But when it comes down to the meat and potatoes, the rig, and what we're doing right now, he basically tells us about lighting and about presentation, but he is involved, and we respect his opinions. He has to be part of the whole process. Do y'all have any experience working with other people to produce podcasts, and kind of how that needs to gel together?
Yeah. One of the biggest things, podcast that I currently do is an actual play, Dungeons and Dragons adventure. And I mean, that obviously takes like a dungeon master and players. So you have to have like an understanding and a sense of respect between like each person's role and how the whole thing runs, but also understand that you're doing a show, so it's not just going to be a normal Dungeons and Dragons game type of thing.
And it's really important, like from the start, to define what are your responsibilities going to be versus everybody else's, because if you get things crossed there, your show is not going to make it. It's just not.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the things you're going to find. If you have too many chefs doing the same thing, you're going to butt heads, and you're bound to not make it past 10 episodes. And you're going to get frustrated. You're going to walk away from it, from something that you could be really successful at,
right,
and have fun with.
And there's no point in getting frustrated, really. Just be open to talking to one another and saying, okay, we didn't do this, so now let's clearly define what we need to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Being open to growth, allowing each, especially if ever something comes to like a point of an argument, or even just like a hot debate, like allow that to be something that's like, all right, because we're all in this together and we are partners in this, let's take some time to figure out. I mean, this is like people skills in general,
right?
Personal skills. Learn to just build from that, because this is something that everybody wants to be a part of.
Right. Mm-hmm. Step one: be a good person.
Well, exactly. Be your best person that you could be, but try not to have too many people want to be the chief too, and you have time. You don't have to have something out right away. Build what you guys are going to talk about. Set your roles, set your ideas out on the table, and say, this is going to be my role. I'm going to be the host, and I could do some editing, or you could do the production and the edit, and you could also be a co-host. You set the roles, and that way you're not stepping on other people's toes and making people feel bad about it too.
Yeah.
that actually rolls right into my into the next step, which was agreement and roles. Yeah, I live for this stuff.
Well, also really quick, just on the
Sure.
on the partners thing, if you're doing a like a dramatic audiobook reading, if that's the one that we're going with,
Yeah.
you could potentially also do that mostly on your own. It definitely would help to have other people to bounce things
Right.
off of. Ideas are always much more exciting when someone else goes, but wouldn't it be cool if? But this is certainly one of the types of podcasts that you could do solo if you have
All right.
like enough
sure.
of gumption to run through it.
So let's say this is a solo project. So each of us is doing our own book and whatever. One thing that we would still need to think about is author, the actual author of that book, and whether or not, if it's more of an indie author that we're doing it for them. Whether it's, maybe I know them personally and I'm reading it and we're going to put it on some service, or whether or not I'm doing it for fun and it's not going to be monetized and I don't want to get sued. And I just want to be clear that that's something there's still technically a partner or an agreement that needs to be made.
Yeah.
So even if you're doing it by yourself for fun, cross and check every box.
Who owns the studio you might be using, type of thing.
Right. Build your own.
Well, exactly. Even be worried about the intro and outro music and stuff. Any kind of rights that you're going to have in there is basically, try to cover all yourself, because those cease and desist letters are not fun, folks. I've gotten a couple of them.
No, sir. I've skirted so close so many times. It's just like, oh, we changed it just enough.
Yeah, right. There's been enough times I do all the music except for just like the intro music for the podcast. So everything else I create. But there are enough times where they're like, "Hey, Gabe, could you do something that sounds like?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can." It's gonna sound barely like it, but it's gonna sound like it.
Sounded likes are awesome.
Yeah.
So that covers all of the third one. The last kind of part of that was who owns what, which is something that even if you're by yourself, you got to know what kind of things you're working with. If it's
who owns that sound effect,
right? And I can't remember who said where you're recording, but if you're not recording in your own space, studios can sometimes claim or have ownership of the actual recording they made.
Oh, yeah.
So you do have to be careful about that. And podcasting, we've talked about it and we will talk about it more this weekend, is you can always just start with your phone, record it yourself, and work your way up from there and get cooler and better equipment. Almost all new modern phones, whether they're Android or iOS, you can get a USB adapter for it, plug in a halfway decent USB mic, and you're rolling.
Oh, sure.
One of my favorite YouTube channels right now, I actually watched him go from just recording and editing on his iPhone to now he actually has equipment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Stuff.
That's awesome. And that's the cool thing about it, though, is and how you're going through with licensing and stuff. Even if, like how you were saying, if you're reading a story or reading an article or something, make sure you credit the person who wrote it, because you can get called for plagiarism or stealing, stuff, and you got to be careful with that, guys.
Yeah. So this actually starts going into, or we're starting to go into the fourth point: equipment and space.
God, these steps flow so well together.
Right?
Yeah.
It's almost
Like somebody put these together or something.
Right.
Are we gonna be sober by the end of this? No.
The podcast sober.
Right. I got you, podcast sober. It's been 8 weeks since I created a podcast.
Oh. It's an
I
addiction,
can't reach
man.
Gabriel. I
Gotta
think
be
he's
careful.
streaming again. so
They just find me in like the basement. I'm like, I've created 19 podcasts this month, man.
There's just 12 screens in front of him.
He's shaking like this. It's like
Just holding a mic.
He's just clicking.
Help me.
So equipment and space. Oh, we were going so well. But so, and we talked about like renting a studio is one of the points I have on there. Whether you're doing it over Zoom like we are, or you're doing it at home, you do need to figure out a budget, what kind of equipment you can get, and definitely assess what you have, because a lot of people have more things than they think. And with the wide array of technology now, you have a lot of options, and I would like to hear some of your inputs. This is
Some of the things with that, like this whole since lockdown, things like little rigs like this and the home studio thing has become so popular. I'm a camp counselor during the summers, and I had a call with one of my campers, and she had like a whole rig with a nice mic, and you're like, you're 13, what? Like, and she's like, yeah, my mom decided to get just all this cool stuff. Like, yeah, it's more accessible, and it's much more I guess like people are becoming more savvy to it, and so they're producing more.
And actually, for audiobooks especially, every person I've met that is an actor that does audiobooks on the regular, it's a pretty sparse setup. Like it's it's a very quiet laptop, or a room where they've put their desktop outside of it, and just a mic, a screen, and a keyboard, just or maybe a mouse, just to kind of it's the bare bones, because you're sitting there for 6 hours getting your voices, maybe doing some edits depending on how you do your editing flow, and you're just like, all right.
That's the cool thing about it too. You had mentioned it earlier, Sean, that people are now, recording podcasts right onto their phones, and it's so simple compared to when we got started. I started when I had the headset mic, and was able to talk to do my podcast that way. Eventually I upgraded to the Blue Snowball, the USB one, and then I went to a Yeti, and then I then went to a condenser mic and a soundboard. But it over time, it just but it's so easy now to do a podcast, and it's just awesome. If you're doing a book, you could have literally your phone talking into your phone, reciting the script right in front of you on your computer. That's how easy it is for doing it. And you could keep on doing takes and doing a chapter at a time, do 3 or 4 versions of it and splice it together in the editing tools. It's simple.
If you're brave, read it off your phone too.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, I don't know about that.
One time I did that.
Yeah, right in the middle of that. Oh, hi mom, how are you?
Airplane mode, man.
Exactly.
I totally forgot about doing that too. I did a summer of Shakespearean sonnets, so like I did one a day for 90 days. Ooh. And I was moving that summer, so like I was actually in my car with my little condenser mic that plugged into my iPhone, just like reading it and recording it at the same time.
That's so good.
But it's and that's actually, gosh, Mike is good at this. So format was the next part, because he mentioned like a couple chapters at a time. Like, how are you going to do this audiobook? Are you going to do a chapter a day? Are you going to do 3 every Wednesday, once a week? And figuring out how you're going to organize that work so that you can do it, but also so that everyone else can hear it is a pretty big thing to consider.
There's a fantastic website. I'm trying to remember what it was called, but it essentially just tells you how long roughly it would take to read a book by the number of words in it. I had to do some stuff recently for people reading books, and we were trying to pick a book, and we were like, well, this one takes roughly 2 hours to read, so we can split that into 5 short little episodes type of thing. So like having that as a tool where you're like, it takes on average 6 hours to read this book. Well, I want to make 10-minute episodes. That's the format I want to shoot for, or 50-minute episodes. Then you can gauge it off of that, and then you can try and see how many chapters it splits into.
That's really cool. Do you happen to remember the name of that website?
I'm searching it right now.
That's
if only we had tools to be able to do that with,
I think it's literally I'm very excited for this title of a website, howlongtoread.com.
That's the one that just bought up a bunch of domains. They're like, look, we're going to need this eventually. We're going to make some money.
howlongtoread.com. I think like the book we wound up settling on was like The Ice Dragon by George R. R. Martin, because it fit the timeline, and it was the right age range for what we were shooting. Nice. So if you're going to do like reading a book, that's a valuable resource just to know on average. And again, some people read slowly. Some people are very fast at reading, which always just amazes me.
Yeah. I don't want to get into that right now.
Right.
But then you also have people who read and you could hear it feels like they're reading right off a teleprompter. And let me tell you that I really had about, it's just like, you need to work on that, folks.
Yeah. And I think that might be in the next step, but I think it's also kind of in this one and formatted, like, definitely read the book first.
Yes.
Well, yeah, if we're talking, especially, Jenna?
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, definitely have a clear understanding of what you're putting out.
Oh, very much so. It's anything. Anytime you're reading like a script, like we're talking about our book, or if you're doing ad copy or anything like that, you should always read through it. Never cold read. Never cold read.
Unless it's just something really, really chill. But yeah, if you're making like a podcast and you're really shooting for something to be like proud of and step out there, yeah, do a read or two beforehand.
That's solid. So actually, after format, I have plan and research. So for an audiobook, yeah, you read the book. There are very few, and there are a few actors, and I'm talking like out of the thousands of audiobooks that come out, every couple months, there's like maybe one or two that can cold read, and it's probably because they know the author. Everyone else, you got to read at least once. But research similar podcasts. If there's, if you're going to do something by George R.R. Martin, see who else has done it, because chances are someone has. And then, plan out how long it's going to take and when you're going to do it, because life gets in the way a lot, especially, at least for me in podcasting. Like, I have to be strict and adamant about, no, Friday's my podcasting day. This is when I do it.
Yes.
And like, it's really hard to tell your boss that.
It slides so easily, and you're like, oh, it's fine. I'll miss just this one, and then it's gone. It's like it's very much so. Fortunately, with my podcast, we're playing D&D, so it's very much the same format as scheduling D&D sessions, which is always kind of a nightmare until everyone in the group just says, "Dang it, this is going to be the day. The universe be damned. This will be our thing."
Yeah, if you want to put something out that you're proud of and put it out every week or on schedule, then you have to make it your job. You have to make it like a priority if you want to be a priority for other people.
Of course. Yeah, because
be a priority for the people.
Be a priority. But that's also how you get listeners, is consistency and also, repetitiveness. Earth Station 1 goes out every Thursday to the public, and we recorded it on every Monday night, and to my wife's chagrin, she basically is like, for the last 10 years we don't do anything on Monday night. I said, yes we do, we podcast. So
of course.
Exactly. So it's pretty awesome, with that. And it's like, because we haven't, in the 10 years we've done it, we've only missed one show in the whole time.
There you go.
So,
and that's
nice.
Not only is that incredibly impressive, 10 years, bravo. But also that's a fast turnaround. I imagine, it's a bit more direct than some things, might not be as heavily produced. If you're doing an audiobook, you might want to do a lot of production. You might want to do very minimal production.
Exactly. I know some people who do audiobooks, they're in production for weeks and everything, to taking out all the ums and ers and just clearing up things. There's so much production in it, and it's pretty awesome that to do it. And you want to put out the perfect product, you want to sound professional, and if it doesn't, people are going to leave you and go to the next George R.R. Martin read podcast.
Can I interrupt everything to say this?
Do it.
I think it fits into plan and research myself, but definitely work on your verbal fillers.
Ooh.
Oh.
How you talk, very important.
Oh yeah. Your ums and uhs and all the little idiosyncrasies. Some of them are super cool and they need to be left in, but some of them need to go away.
Yes.
Yeah. If you're doing an audiobook, none of that is cute to me.
And it's so much easier to work on it before you even start recording than to sit there and take out every single little thing.
Yes. Yes.
So
Every audio engineer,
Ugh.
like for listening to this, just did the.
hallelujah.
Preach it.
So
Yeah, that for any verbal like performance thing, that is definitely like for if you're doing recitations or anything, you're gonna want to
Yeah.
think about how you phrase, how you shift from thing to thing, how you stall. That's
Right.
that's a big one.
Yeah.
I
And you
have
might
a stutter, and I've been doing my best for a long time to try and get rid of that stutter.
Take singing lessons.
Yeah. Singing lessons, just singing a lot,
Mm-hmm.
speaking slowly is my
Yes.
favorite. Whenever
Take
I
a breath.
DM, my characters often speak slowly and carefully, unless they're very nervous character. Then I just use my normal voice. Which
And that
works.
character has a stutter. It's okay.
And that character has a stutter. Look at that.
Exactly.
And they're like, wow, that's really interesting. How'd you do that? I was inspired.
Don't know.
Yeah.
Definitely wasn't me though.
Right. Gabe,
So-
you do stutters so well.
So we kind of hit the
Good skill.
next, the next point, not so much, but the two after that, recording and editing a little bit. I'm not sure why I put this in there, but I think I was just kind of still in the pre-planning phase, and that's having an icon or a picture, something that you can visually identify when people are looking for you.
Yeah.
And then like a tagline and a short description. Because that's something that you might not have until after you've recorded, but you need to start thinking about, or at least know that you need when you start out.
And it's very important because there's a lot of podcasts that I will look at, and like while I don't generally do the judging books by their cover, I do want to see that somebody put their effort into presenting the podcast.
Right.
Right.
I mean, and I hate thinking about it like this, but you are creating a brand.
Mhm.
Basically, you're trying to present yourself to other people, and you want to put that best face forward. Otherwise, nobody's going to click you.
Right. So the idea I just popped into my head, and it's mostly because of the George R.R. Martin thing. Like, let's say we're reading a George R.R. Martin novel, short story, is as Jar Jar Binks. So it's just Jar Jar Martin reads, and you just have like a knockoff Jar Jar face, and a little microphone. Winter is coming, But
It can work though.
right. I don't know if I could sit through all of that, but I would listen to 10 minutes of it.
Absolutely. And see, but like that idea though kind of goes into that formatting where it's like, hey, if I could sit through 10 minutes of it, I bet my listeners can probably sit through 6 spread out over an hour.
Sure.
Could be
But
a
you
fun
do
thing.
need, visually something catching, at least that represents you, and then like a very succinct description that like, you can throw out in a sentence or two. This is it. This is the thing you're listening to. And so you can tell people when you talk to them, this is the thing.
Yes, this is the image, and like knowing who your audience is important for that. If you're doing like I've seen a lot of podcasts have the little like microphone symbol in the background of an image somewhere. Immediately, oh, this is a podcast. Like, it must be sophisticated because it's line art type of thing. And it can be very, very simplistic or very super complex. All these different things, but how you even write the tagline is very indicative. If it's very serious, or if you're using like super gothic descriptions, everyone's going to know it's a spooky podcast. If you're using silly descriptions for things, people will know it's a more comedy-based podcast, which I think is one of the most popular genres of podcasts out there.
Like for Jar Jar Martin. Yeah.
Jar Jar Martin.
Wow, you went
He
there.
said to Targaryen.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Set to Targaryen.
Oh God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is my idea. No one take it, please. I'm sure it's actually already out there because every podcast.
It's out in the universe.
Right? Do it. Go ahead and do it. So after that, I have recording and editing, and I split those up.
Well, I was going to say really quick there, we did have a
Right. I did see that.
comment. Ruggles, I like that.
Yes. The Minnesota
Asking,
accent.
what are your thoughts on regional accents? Like, sometimes they catch themselves doing a Minnesota accent, falling into their Minnesota accent. In my opinion, a lot of accents, like unless it's to a degree where it's starting to lean towards like only people of that region could understand you, which I mean that's one of the things. Like I've lived in Virginia for a long time, but my parents are from New York, and so I get a good spread of the whole East Coast accents and a variety in there. And there are some times where I'll be talking to somebody and I can understand them perfectly, but the person sitting next to me has no idea what they just said. And it is to that degree, you might want to focus on how you're like, enunciate your words, figure that out. But I think it's charming. It gives you who you are, similar to like you were saying before, like if you have a speech impediment, or if you have like something that makes your mouth different.
It would be great to hear Shakespeare ridden by a New York cabbie or something like that, which would be awesome.
Yes.
It would be it would be awesome to hear something like
Horatio, I'm walking here.
Exactly. Right. What do you think you're doing? To be or not to be? Yeah. So
go back and watch Bard Talk.
Yeah, for real.
Bard Talk.
Well, exactly.
But this does actually hit on a thing that I was super self-conscious about for a very long time, because I wanted to go into acting, and I have, not right now because I've done many years of voice and diction classes, but I have a Southern accent, like a deep Southern
like
accent.
Alabama.
Georgia.
Oh, Georgia. I love
the
Georgia
hills
accent.
of Georgia.
Yes.
Georgia.
When I get mad, you'll hear it.
Good.
But I don't think that it's anything that anybody needs to be self-conscious of, as long as you do, like Gabe said, pronounce and pronunciate. Make sure everyone can hear you and understand you.
Yeah.
And you have to be consistent.
Yes.
That's it. Is if you start your novel off with a Minnesotan or an Appalachian or a whatever accent, you got to stay in it. And if you start off in a clear accent, or you're doing an accent from somewhere else because you think it'd be funny, if you read the line wrong and you switch back to some other voice, you got to go back and re-record it.
Yeah.
Because that will take people out of it.
Unless that is the specific shtick, again. Unless your thing is like, oh, I just read every episode in a different accent because I'm that cool. I have 4 billion accents to run. Be careful with that.
In which case, I hate you. How do you do it?
Well, exactly. We used to listen growing up. We used to hear and watch, listen to Prairie Home Companion. And when you had Garrison Keillor on the show, and it's like, you had his voice so monotone and everything and it's like, is that guy still alive? Put him, pick him with a pin or something. And it's just, but his Minnesotan accent, you got that. And that's what you wanted from it. And I learned later to really appreciate stuff like that. And, because you could hear that kind of thing. And that's what you want to try to produce. You want, when you're doing a show, that's your identity, that the people are, basically, oh, that's Mike talking, or that's Jenna, that's and it's just pretty awesome that's how they're realizing, oh, she's going to have the Southern accent, or this guy's going to have a New York accent. It's just awesome. And that's how you identify yourself with,
especially if you can like if that is ever something that you're like, I'm not going to be able to get rid of this accent, but I can talk clearly and people will love it. If you can exemplify that accent, like show, because I've heard lots of different people. I've traveled plenty, heard lots of different accents through my life. I love hearing people talk. I love people in general, but I love hearing people talk and their voices and people being confident with their voices. Hearing somebody just like lean into their own personality and their own brand is so beautiful. And that is something that I think comes out when people do podcasts and confidently do podcasts, because again, there's no face. It's just your voice coming out.
I'll throw it out there. And so Ruggles, lead into it. It's be who you are. That's okay. So I work with a guy who's he's a rapper. He's a rap artist. He's from Texas. And when I say Texas, I mean like
Texas.
I never heard his accent. As I've known him, he only speaks as though he's always in a music video. He's like, yeah, you know what I'm saying, know what I mean? And by the way, he's a ginger, a white guy. But he's and he's a good rapper. He's won battles and contests and stuff. And you look at him, you go, well, okay, this doesn't click, but that's you. And then a friend of mine from Texas came to visit. Turns out they knew each other, and they started talking like they were from back home in Texas. And I'm like,
yes. Oh, absolutely.
You should rap like that. That would be hilarious. That's what I want to see.
Pull out some Colt Ford.
And there's actually Houston has its own unique rap scene, which is, and he's from Dallas, so it's not technically the same city, but still regionally he's from that area. I was just surprised, and And again, I think he does it because he wants to fit into that thing, but it's totally fine. Go be and do you.
Yeah.
So I think we actually kind of hit on recording here already because of this conversation, but editing, and Jenna touched on it with the ums and the weird bits and pieces of your speech. Editing can take 5 times longer than however it took for your recording if you're doing your own editing. So plan and take an Advil.
Yes.
Take some time. Be prepared, especially if you're doing your own editing. Be prepared to like separate yourself from yourself when you sit down to edit, because if you're going to be like sitting there and be like, oh my god, I'm horrible at this, why is my voice like this?
Oh yeah, the first time you hear your own voice, you're going to be like, no, that's not me.
No, exactly. I've been doing this for 12 years now, and I self-edit everything. And I can't stand hearing my own voice most of the time. And it's just like, people said, Mike, I've had people come up to me. I could have you read the phone book to me. I like how you sound. I like your voice and how you talk. And to myself, it's like, right down
it just sounds wrong. And you're like, why is this wrong?
Exactly.
Who am I?
And who do I edit the most when I do my podcast? Me. More than I do any of my guests, any of the co-hosts, anything. I edit myself to death. And it's just like, because I'm my harshest critic. And that's what you're going to find out. People think, oh, I could do a podcast, I could record it, pop it out there right away, or it might take me 15 minutes to edit. No. If that's the kind of podcast you want to put out, fine. But for a good sounding podcast, you want to do as much editing as possible, but you also have to know when to step away at the same time.
Yes.
Don't drive yourself crazy.
That's why we've done these steps to get to it, is like, you need to know what you want for your final product. So that when you get to this point of editing, you can go, all right, I need a chapter at a time. So maybe you record the whole book at once, but you edit a chapter a week, because that's going to be enough work if you have a full-time job. Because let's say a chapter is half an hour. Well, that's you've got at least 2.5 hours editing probably in front of you until you get really good at it. And then you start telling yourself every time you record, you're like, all right, no ums today. All right, so
every time.
Right.
Especially getting started, because it'll be like, well,
let me tell you how it's going today.
Then you take a moment.
Just needles.
Yes. Pre-editing, getting things done before you actually have to go and edit them. And you'll get better at it as time goes on. But that is a huge thing.
Right.
Huge. There was a podcast that I listened to one time where their shtick was that the podcast would be them discussing political concepts while in a hot tub. And I was like, this sounds interesting, but hot tub sound the entire podcast. And I was like, well, and of course it's only half the time, because the hot tub stops bubbling after like 20 minutes. So it's like a 30-minute episode. So it's, and then later it's do, 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 and you can hear their voices clearly. Like, it's not a bad idea, but you're making more work for yourself. There's a better way to do it, I bet, is kind of my thought process. There's a better way to do it.
I mean,
also, the whole idea of the hot tub, I'm like, no one else can share that experience. You know that, right? Unless they're in a hot tub when they listen to it.
Well, you'd have to also do every episode in a hot tub. That would be an amazing podcast.
Like, I'm all for the recording of this. Don't get me wrong, but not so much the listening.
Listening, the editing. Like, if they, I don't know if they had an edit who edited their stuff, but
so
sorry for that.
Once you edit, publish.
Once you edit.
Now, if you're doing a book, especially if it's a longer one, I would probably aim to have a few chapters done, like 5 or 6, and just start publishing those and kind of doing a rolling editing publishing process. That's what I would do. Anyone else have any kind of thoughts on publishing a book format as a podcast?
For book format, like before, when we were talking about sort of setting up what your schedule for like reading to what your release schedule will be.
Mhm.
If you're doing like a long book, or you're hitting a whole like 7-book series, then you can kind of do the whole like I plan to read, for 3 hours, however long I can get in 3 hours one day. Let's see if I can just push through it, drink some water, take a throat lozenge or something, and just push through 3 hours of reading, so that over the next 5 weeks I can produce like an episode a week for or whatever, or like chop it into 6 weeks, 30-minute episodes, type of thing.
Depending what your formatting is you should always do a few in advance, just so you get a couple under your belt, and then you also get experience of actually knowing what it's going to take to create your podcast.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, your first and your 7th episode do not sound the same.
No, Lord.
No.
I need to go back and touch that first episode again at some point, because it's always one of those things like, hey, check out my podcast, but for episodes 1 to 5,
Maybe
just be careful.
Skip a first few.
Be forgiving.
Yeah.
We didn't have
funny.
mics yet. We had one mic. Help.
Because it's like, for us, like when we have people join our network, we tell them we want you to have at least 5 to 10 shows under your belt, so you could get your sound and what it's like to do a podcast and stuff. And you just don't go and say, here's my first podcast. Oh, I'm going to stop after my 5th because I didn't like how it sounded, or it was too much work and all that. And you're going to find out it's a lot of work, folks.
Mm-hmm.
So you publish it. And of course, in publishing, you also have to pick a platform, hosting, any sort of RSS feeds. And hosting is not the same as getting it onto a service like Stitcher or Spotify or whatever that Google and Apple call themselves now, Apple Podcasts and Google
Play.
stuff. Google Play, sure.
Google Play, yeah.
Google
one of those.
stuff.
Google thing.
Google out of me.
The Goog.
The Goog.
The Goog Pod.
Have you listened to the Goog?
I plug my ears into the Goog Pod every day.
I love the Goog
Pod.
But no, so there's a few steps even into publishing where you really need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
It's not really actually just clicking publish. It's putting it and then
there's different
circulating
prices.
it.
Yeah, prices.
Gotta
That's a big
be
one.
careful with that one, because you don't want to start stuffing your podcast into one area where no one who listens to that kind of podcast, unless you're really good at being unique and snacking all those fresh virgin listeners.
What kind of podcast is this?
Virgin ears. You know what I meant.
I do.
Books. We're talking about books.
So you've got your first 5 chapters out. You've figured out your tagline. You've got your image. You've got it recorded. You've got it edited. It's on a site. You've got it linked all to your stuffs. You still have to tell people.
Yeah.
You got to promote. Just because it's on there doesn't mean anyone's going to go find the thing they've never heard of and there's no listeners. And I'm pretty sure everyone to speak to this is all the nooks and crannies you have to go into to just get people to click and listen to the first 5 minutes. What are your favorite places to then even if it's a book, I think this applies to any topic, but if it's a book, I'm sure you can imagine what communities you'd have to go do some outreach with.
Book clubs, libraries.
Book clubs.
Yeah.
Nice.
Second and Charles. They promote the heck out of stuff.
Oh, that's sweet of them. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been to one. It's down the street,
Mm-hmm.
but so far quarantined away. It's definitely one of the things that I've seen is don't be afraid to make that ask of people. To just be like, hey, listen to my podcast. Check it out.
Yeah. All they can
Please.
do is say no, and that's the worst thing they can do.
Yes.
Well, exactly. How many of your family members actually listen to your podcast?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Into the camera.
But Fortunately, my mom does promote mine at her job. I've gotten 3 listeners from her just promoting in her job, so that's exciting.
Of course. Oh, you have a Doctor Who T-shirt on. My son does a Doctor Who podcast.
Yeah, that's the great thing is that like all of our parents now know what podcasts are, and they think they're cool for saying, "My kid does a podcast." It's like, oh, they all do. It's okay.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like, oh, your kid does it too? Okay.
we should get them to hang out sometime. You're like, wait,
They might
Maybe
become
they'll
friends.
get out of their own basements. It'll
Ma'am,
be
I'm
fine.
36. I don't want to hang out with your 14-year-old. No offense to any 14-year-olds that might be watching, but
But a 36-year-old man should not be hanging out with you.
no,
Let's be
no,
clear.
this mustache is trouble enough.
oh God,
That's a whole nother podcast on itself.
whole other
That's the title of the podcast.
That's a whole other
God.
mustache.
This
This
So-
mustache has problems.
So,
Beware the stash.
so you do have to seek out avenues, whether they're digital or physical, to put up a flyer, kind of post, talk to people. Honestly, like if I'm pre-times, like if I was sitting at a bar and people are like, so what do you do? I'm like, oh, I have a ton of things I do, but I'm going to talk about my podcast. So I want listeners, and turns out everything I do is alcohol related, and we're drinking. So
Right.
you want to hear what it's like when this kind of person gets drunk and they talk about their life story. It's amazing.
It's amazing. It is. I mean, there's a lot of shows where there are certain people, just the way that they tell stories, you could listen to them drunk, sober. You're like, this is weirdly centering.
Fascinating.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there are other people who are like, okay, I love this show, but when he drinks or when the show goes on for more than an hour, all of a sudden I'm just like, nah, I can't do it.
You can tell how my guest was based on my editing and who you can hear more of
There you go.
in the episode. It's like, oh gosh, you know what? It's gonna be a host heavy episode.
Yeah.
So we're actually, I think I said the last timing thing I saw was we got about 5 minutes of the official show
Yeah.
left, maybe 4 now. I can. There's a clock down the bottom of the screen. But the last point I had before you basically go back and repeat this process is engage, because just because you posted on a Facebook page or Discord channel or on Twitter, go back and follow up with anyone that likes it or says that sounds cool. Even if it's a thank you or hey, please listen, or even directly just besides finding those groups and saying, hey, I have a podcast, engage with them about their interests.
Yeah.
If you find a group or Facebook group or whatever, besides just saying hi, make sure when someone else posts that you're actually meaningfully interacting with the people that are interested in what you're interested in, because people can smell a phony, I think, pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like podcasting is a community. It is a group
That's
of people
exactly.
who love to do things. That's why there's networks. That's why there's all these services, all these hosting things, because there's enough people doing this. And if you want to be part of that community, there is support there. There are people who are eager to help you out, to show you what's the to-dos and what not to do's, best practices, like this panel.
Yeah.
But that's also how you find out if you're doing it right. Also, silence a lot of times is not bad. A lot of times you're going to hear from people if you screw up and if you mess up something or you do something they don't like. That's when they become more vocal. A lot of times you'll get a heart or a thumbs up or something in a message, but try to interact with both sides. Find out what you're doing right, but also find out what you're doing wrong, how you can improve yourself. And that's, that's the best part about it.
Awesome.
But don't let anybody be mean to you, and don't engage with the trolls.
No, do not. Do not.
Trolls. There is, like, fortunately, and you'll get better at it, especially if you're starting out, telling the difference between trolls and people who are like constructively criticizing you.
Right.
Mhm.
Because generally, people who are constructively criticizing you start off with like a polite tone.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Like, hey, I love this podcast. I do think maybe you shouldn't eat your microphone.
Yeah,
Yes.
Like, but it's so much fun.
exactly.
microphone.
As we like to say, haters are going to be haters,
Hate is gonna hate,
basically.
yes.
Hate. All right, I'm going to read back through the list really quick. And then I would like everyone to also say where we can find the stuff that you make and interact with you meaningfully online. So really quickly, the 12 steps as I've written them out: inception or creation, partners, agreement and roles, setting up your space and equipment, format, planning and research, iconography, pictures, taglines and descriptions, record, edit, publish, promote, and engage. And if you do those, you should have at least a relatively well fleshed out podcast, whether it's on books, movies, video games, etc. Gabriel, Jenna, Mike, where can we find all the lovely things that you do?
You can find the podcast Quid Pro Roll on all the most popular services: Spotify, Apple Podcast, all that. Check us out at goblinsandgrowlers.com/quidproroll. That's the actual website.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at JenChill and at JennaGary14, pretty much everywhere, honestly, and at Panelology for my podcast. And I have a lot of things that are going to be coming out this year. And yes, Kurt, I'm wearing a Blue Yeti and my headset mic, sorry.
Both.
Uh-oh. Okay. You can find me as part of the ESO network. My podcast is Earth Station 1, Earth Station Who, and also the DragonCon Report. And of course, you can find us up on Facebook. You can find us wherever fine podcasts are found. So we're even up there with the fine podcasts, as we like to say. So it's pretty awesome. And so it's pretty cool. We love talking to people. We love being on social media. And, please join in our community. We have a bunch of great people. Like everyone has been saying, community is huge when you have a podcast.
Yeah.
And my name is Sean Weiland. You can find me on the social medias as male_NPC, whether it's Twitter or Instagram. I'm on Instagram the most. I think Twitch, that's also my Twitch name. And then you can find any of the podcasts I do on your favorite podcast services, Wasted Knowledge Podcast. We live stream on Facebook as The Beery Traveler. And you can also find me doing all sorts of weird audio VO stuff in random fantasy fiction and video games also throughout this year.
I love it.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And enjoy the rest of your virtual con.
Do we get a token now that we passed through the 12-step program?
It's actually going to be like this Nintendo cartridge. I'll make some mini ones and send them out to you.
That's so exciting.